Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to Maddox Scale and Customer Success Summit. You're currently watching Human and Machine Symbiosis and Customer Success. I am thrilled and excited to announce our speaker today. And as I introduce him, I'm going to have him answer a quick icebreaker question, which is what would you like to scale in your personal life? But before I go ahead and ask him, I'll introduce him. His name is Alex Turkovich. He's Director of Adoption Programs at Flexera. He also started a podcast, the Digital Customer Success Podcast, one of the most popular podcasts in the CS community. So before we get going, Alex, first and foremost, welcome. Really excited to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here.
And with the icebreaker question, what is it? What is the thing in your personal life, if you could choose one thing that you would like to scale?
I struggled with this one a little bit, but we were talking a little bit before the session. I think for me, it's like I'd like to be able to scale just dealing with my son's teenage hormonal fun.
I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would agree with you. I have a toddler, and we're not there yet, but there's a lot of chores there that I'd like to scale right now as well. But awesome. Before we get started, just as a reminder to folks in the audience, please feel free to add any questions that you have to the chat. Any questions that we don't get to today, we'll make sure that we'll share them with Alex after the session so we can get his answers. And alongside that, we're also going to be posting the recording in our resource hub on matic.io, and all of you will get notified about that once it goes live. So with that, Alex, I'll give you the stage, and excited to hear what you have for us today.
Cool. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm starting to see lovely little answers in terms of like where you're from. Please feel free to keep them going. You've probably been doing it all day, but it's always good to see where you're from and whatnot. And I did learn that we are doing this at the same time as Mr. Greg Danes is doing his presentation today. So I'm honored that you're here. I kind of feel like we're at the little kids table in conjunction with, all the adults are over talking to Greg. But anyway, humbled that you're here. So great to see you. I see some Denver. There's one Canadian in here, some Mountain View, some Madison, Wisconsin. That's pretty cool. So thanks again for coming. Today, we're going to talk about humans and digital together, because I think my personal opinion is the two should be together to make a successful program out of your digital motions. I do want to spend a little bit of time just giving you an intro about me. I'm in Austin. I don't see anybody else here in Austin, but that's cool. I'll represent for you guys. Married for a long time. We got a 13-year-old son. I do, despite the beer belly, I do run half marathons quite frequently. I spent a lot of time in learning and development, professional services, Travis County. Look at that. And then, sorry, I'm going back and forth between the chat. Super distracting. Last 4 or 5 years, I've been really focused on digital CS, like focused hard. I've been hosting the Digital CX podcast for over a year now, which is crazy. I eat audiobooks and podcasts for breakfast. My TikTok addiction is super strong, and I'm actually close to uninstalling it because it's not good. And I've got a nice vinyl collection behind me. So there you go. That's a little bit about me. I want to find out a little bit more about you. And so, David, if you'll launch the first poll, which is essentially a question about how kind of mature you are in your own digital programs, whether it is your own within your team or a digital program that you're working on solo. I'd love to understand, on a scale of 1 to 5, how mature do you feel like you are in digital? And I realized I didn't put any guideposts in there. 1 is like you send an email once in a while. 5 is like you have your personas on lock. You've automated the entire customer journey for each persona. You're using generative AI on a daily basis. And so that's kind of the scale. Got 57% participation, 12 answers total, and it's kind of right in the middle. Cool. We'll let it go for a second longer here. This is super helpful. I want to know who answered who answered with a 4. 67%. We got 71%. 15 answers right down the middle, mostly threes. That's super helpful. So for me anyway, to know who I'm talking with. Who put that 4 in there? That was you, Tom. Tom, way to go, 4. Also, number 1, a couple of you answered number 1. Don't feel bad. We we start somewhere, right? And that's a big part of why you're here. So today we're going to talk about automation and humans together. And I want to start with Elon Musk. Love him, hate him, that's irrelevant. But Elon Musk in 2018, he sent out this tweet, which has now become somewhat infamous, but he basically said that, look, we automated way too much at Tesla. And this was right during that time, if you're familiar with kind of the Tesla story in 2018, where he was basically living in the Fremont factory, trying to get the Model 3 production line going. And he was there night and day, sleeping in the office. And what they ended up doing is actually just ripping out a ton of automation out of their Model 3 production, which for me was kind of, when I learned about this, was a bit of a watershed moment, because especially in the auto industry, you're so used to having these automated production cycles, and you see robots and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's some intricate things, and there's some kind of fiddly things that a human is just way better at. And so I thought that was a fitting thing to start with, because even the great Tesla, that's known for all this automation and stuff like that, they went way too hard on automation and pulled a little back, and decided to design a facility around having humans involved in the auto production process. So I felt that was super relevant. But for me, that kind of set the tone in terms of what the relationship between the machine and the human really should be. And so when I think of things like digital CS and generative AI, the classic thing is like, hey, it's going to take my job. That's like the fear line that a lot of people use, is it's here to take my job, it's here to replace me. And I'm here to tell you that it's here to enhance and support what we do as humans. And so, things like automating insights, reducing time spent on sending the same email 50 times in a row, so that you can really focus your time on driving value outcomes with your customers. Ultimately, that's what we want to do in a really healthy digital program, is to ensure that not only are you operating efficiently as a CS program in a customer facing modality, but internally also you're using those motions to help drive efficiencies throughout your CS team. Now, if you've listened to the podcast, actually give me a quick thumbs up in the chat, or a yes or something like that if you listen to the podcast. I'd be curious. But on the Digital Customer Success podcast, I ask all my guests the same question, which is to say, like, what's their definition of digital customer success? I've compiled it all on the website. You can go to that QR code and check it out yourself. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that, because it's been defined any number of different ways by a lot of different people. But we're going to take a slightly different spin on digital CS, because in my view, we in digital CS and digital CS practitioners tend to like to make something out of nothing, right? We are this scrappy bunch of the post-sale community. We take two systems and integrate them via a harebrained integration that we came up with, or we pull stuff together to send those emails out. And so to me, that denotes that we're kind of like the MacGyvers of CS. And that totally dates me. Don't judge too hard. But I think digital puts the MacGyver into CS, right? We're scrappy. We build stuff out of nothing, but maybe with fewer missiles strapped to our shoulder. But anyway, which leads me to really why. Why do we want to combine humans and digital motions together? And that's essentially what, what we're here to really dig into deeper today. And I want to start with a few examples. Actually, really, the rest of this is going to be very heavy on examples, because what I want you to walk away from this presentation with are tactical, tangible things that you can go try out in your own programs to make sure that you're bolstering your humans, whether they're internal humans or customer humans. But to start, I want to tell you a little story about my storm door, which is, I realize, quite unconventional. That right there in the picture is not my storm door, but it is a storm door. We had an issue with our door; it would not close properly. The mechanism to make sure the door doesn't slam shut was broken. Tried to buy a replacement part, couldn't find it, so I reached out to the manufacturer. And like an antisocial person that I am, I used their chatbot, thinking I was going to get routed to an agent who was going to help me order a replacement part. Well, I put my text into the chatbot, and I got a nice kind of human sounding response right away. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. It's generative AI. Let's see where this goes. Um, it understood my problem. It understood what part I was after. It had me go to my door and enter a little code that was on the door, and then responded with, "Looks like you bought your door within the last 5 years, so it's under warranty. What's your address?" I put in my address, and it had put in an order for me for a replacement part without ever engaging with a human. And I was pretty blown away by this, because it was the first time that I'd ever really encountered a true uh, humanless service encounter without any human involved. I was floored, right? Um, but then the next day, I get a phone call. The phone call is from this company. It's a human on the line, and she was very, very nice, and she was calling to basically follow up on the transaction. She wanted to follow up on and to see how everything was going, whether that was the interaction was to my liking, whether was there anything else going on with the door. Like, she was genuinely interested in my overall experience, and it highlighted a couple things to me. The first is, again, humans and digital should coexist, because it turned a wow moment into a holy crap moment for me as a customer. And the second was that, as this individual that called me, she didn't have to deal with the ordering of things. She didn't have to deal with de-escalation. She didn't have to deal with those kinds of things. She just got to be the good person, the good guy, the good gal on the other line, and got to talk to me like an actual human. And it highlighted to me how important this getting this right is, so that the folks who are actually engaging with customers in real life, on the other end of the phone, um, how important that relationship is, and removing the mundane from the relationship makes it so much more effective. So it's Larson, by the way, if you're curious what the storm door company was. So anyway, wanted to tell you that because it's a prime example of human and digital symbiosis. And I've used this analogy in the past, um, of digital essentially being an exoskeleton to the human, right? To You build these digital motions around your human to bolster them, to make them stronger, to make them, look really good, and to make them do amazing things that otherwise they wouldn't be able to do on their own. But for me, perhaps this is a little bit too intimidating. So, perhaps we look at something a little bit more like this, where you have assistance, you have human assistance that is there to, help you get some difficult tasks done with much more ease, and to the customer, it's much more felt than seen. So, a couple of light examples that I want to give you. And these are all things that a lot of people do, right? Purely digital, which is fine, absolutely, totally fine. But when it comes to, let's say, the welcome email, for instance, there is a way to interject your humans into that process to make it, better, make it more special, make it something that's actually impactful. So if you, for instance, put a link to book a call with a onboarding team member or somebody on the scale team, that then drives additional value for the emails that you're sending out, and it creates this air of, okay, emails this company is sending me down the line might actually have some value in it, not just blah 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 blah. Release notes is another example of where you might be tempted to just spam your customers regardless of their situation with the latest release notes and things like that. However, if they are if they have an assigned CSM, for instance, that would be a great opportunity for you to actually route that email, same template via the CSM. You can send it out automatically, but have it come from the CSM, and that then helps the CSM in terms of being a point of value and rapport building for the CSM. And another, example of this, and something that a lot of folks do, is an automated handoff of information pre-sale, post-sale, for instance, or after completion of an onboarding project. A lot of times, that information is handed off very manually in handoff meetings and notes being handed off and those kinds of things. By automating a lot of those things between systems or from team to team or into various templates and whatnot, you can again, bolster your humans. So I want to go next to another kind of larger example of this. And this is kind of out of a playbook that we use for our NPS responses. But it doesn't have to be NPS. It can be really any survey program that you might be running. And, one of my philosophies just around surveys in general is, if your customers are taking the time to respond to a survey and to give you feedback, you should in turn, uh, you know, acknowledge the fact that they've given feedback and engage with them as a human after that point of feedback. And initially, that may seem like it's a really daunting thing to do. And without digital automation in the background, it can be a very daunting thing to do. But digital helps make those kinds of responses, very tangible. I mean, the amount of times that I have responded to a survey, and especially NPS, and have never gotten a response back, it's probably 9 times out of 10 where I just don't hear anything back, from a company to whom I've given, survey feedback to, other than like an automated email or whatever. So it's almost expected in a way. And so I feel like there's this massive opportunity when a customer goes to give you feedback to engage with the customer and to turn it into something other than just a point of feedback, to turn it into, a post-survey transaction and an exchange of ideas and an exchange of, additional, words. Obviously, there could be some de-escalation involved, but there could also be some work towards advocacy, and those kinds of things coming out of that. So I want to give you 3 examples of a survey flow, and it's going to go from kind of good, better to best, and it's a simplified version of what we run for our NPS program. This is super simple. I think we all get this, right? It's a customer responds to an email, send out an automated thank you, you raise an internal alert, and a human follows up. That human could be a BDR, it could be a scaled CSM, it could be any number of people. But the basic flow is like, you get a response, they get an initial automated thing. At this point, they're probably not expecting much more from you, but you do like a human follow-up at the end of that. One thing that we do is we segment by CSM versus scaled. So again, the example that we used before about if there's a CSM owned account or not. And so in that sense, what we'll do is we'll split it and we'll alert the CSM internally and have them follow up with their customer versus the pool team that'll follow up if it's a non-CSM owned account. And in the case of NPS anyway, then you have this notion of promoter and detractor. And so that then, creates another branching point here where your automated response is going to look different, whether it's a promoter or a detractor. The playbooks that your CSMs run are going to look different, whether it's a promoter or a detractor. And so again, this doesn't have to be NPS related. You can use this for any number of different surveys. The point is you're building the automation into the system to make it incredibly easy for your team to follow up with customers, to see what your customers are saying, and to feed that information to the appropriate person to then follow up with the customer. There's another set of automations that we run on the back end that help with moving that feedback, if it's written feedback, through to various organizations internally to help drive some improvements there. But wanted to at least share that with you. And it looks like a couple of you have responded and saying that you're doing something similar, which is super cool. Super cool. A couple more examples. By a show of, let's type in the chat. Let's see, what should you type in the chat? Type in the chat yes if you are interacting with your customers on Slack. Anybody engaging customers? Slack. Christine is. Cool. Christine. Yes, but it's new. Carly. Cool. Very little. Exploring doing more. Elizabeth. Awesome. 3 of you. Cool. That's great. I mean, it's a thing, right? And some of you are forced to do it. Like if you're not in a platform per se, if you're supporting a product that isn't like a platform where people log in, Slack or Teams can be an excellent way to engage customers. And this is some stuff that Slack put out in terms of the statistics. They basically say that, they can reduce the number of customer meetings and increase the engagement rate from your customers by engaging with them in Slack and having that quick back and forth dialogue where you're not waiting on emails and those kinds of things, right? So, customer channels in Slack, that's an excellent example. Automating things like onboarding and product feedback, and even running some executive business reviews in there. A lot of times, your execs, especially if you're a tiny portion of an executive spend, they're not going to want to be on calls with you necessarily. So Slack can be a great alternative for you to actually distribute, small, concise messages to your executives, to your customer executives, just to let them know where they stand in terms of value realization. There's a tool that I put a QR code link to called ClearFeed. It's not a promotion or anything. I'm not getting a cut off of that, but ClearFeed is a really cool platform that allows you to make a little bit better sense of engaging customers in Slack. So pretty cool solution there. Anyway, Slack. Now, another example of things, I'd be curious to see how many of you do that. So feel free to respond if you're doing an ROI calculator. ROI calculators have been known to sales folks for a really long time because it's a great way to kind of predict how a customer is going to do once they sign for the product. But not a lot of folks use it post-sale. So this is an example that Josh Schachter of Update AI posted the other day of an ROI calculator that they run, and kudos to him for posting that. But it's another example of a digital tool that you can implement that helps your CSMs to really quickly get to the bottom line of demonstrable value realization within your customers. So I'm assuming from your silence that none of you are running ROI calculators. So go out and build you one. The one thing that you haven't heard me talk about yet is artificial intelligence. and you're probably sick of hearing about artificial intelligence. Quite frankly, I am too. But I do want to understand from you um, how you're using, if you yourself are using artificial intelligence and specifically generative AI like ChatGPT or Bing or whatever in your daily lives. So I've got another poll up for you, or I will shortly, that is all about your personal use of AI. I want to understand how often you are using artificial intelligence. There we go. Poll is up. Are you using it hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or never? Cool. Answers coming in. Four never. The nevers are beating everybody so far. Some weekly, some hourly. One hourly person. By the way, I fall into probably the daily category, but I didn't not too long ago. I would say it was weekly not long ago. Cool. About half of you responded so far. Thank you for that. Um, it's a tie between weekly and never. That's cool. Good to know. Elizabeth can't live without it. Can't live without it. Um, that is, shoot, what quote am I thinking of? Oh, Spaceballs. Her Royal Highness's matched luggage. She can't live without it. Anyway, that also dates me. Artificial intelligence, right? It's this thing. It's this thing. And I recently ran across a couple of stats that are kind of supported by the poll. But it basically says in the SaaS industry that roughly a third of SaaS workers use generative AI on a daily basis, even less in customer success. Roughly 24% of SaaS workers in CS use Gen AI on a regular basis. And I think for my money, that's a huge missed opportunity, a massive missed opportunity. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about how you can make those little changes to incorporate it into your daily life, and also how if you're a leader, how your CSMs can incorporate it into your daily life. In fact, this last episode of the podcast was a primer on generative AI. So go check that out. It came out on Tuesday. Because I talk a lot about some of the tactical implications of using this stuff on a daily basis. But I want to talk on a higher level a little bit more. I feel like I don't know how to use it properly, Anna. That's an amazing comment. Thank you for that. I want to take you a level higher for a second, because machine learning has been around for a long time. This isn't new stuff necessarily. And there are some really cool platforms out there that are starting to use this stuff in very innovative ways, where a predictive machine learning model is predicting your churn risk based on telemetry that they've gotten from churned accounts. So really cool stuff. And then they're giving you a prescriptive model is giving you some recommended courses of action, which then can be fielded by a combination of human and or generative motions. And I think that generative and human connection point, that middle point right there, is a really powerful thing that we can look at as these things become more and more part of our daily lives, where human actions can be really supported by this analysis, and generative AI supporting the actual creation of content to make it easy for humans to follow up on that kind of stuff. Now, look, with a few founders that are kind of on the cutting edge of this stuff. But to your point, and to Anna's point in the chat, what about that day-to-day usage? It's kind of this scary thing, right? And a lot of people I talk to are like, well, how do I get into it? How do I start using it on a regular basis? And I'm going to give you one way to start. that is essentially a model for prompting, because that's prompting is half the battle for a lot of people. I think most everybody has maybe gone into chat gpt and said, you know y- the novelty of it, they've said, okay, write me an article about, I don't know, donkey farming. Is that even a thing? I don't know. Any donkey farmers out there? Uh, but write me an article about so and so. Right? Simple prompt, one sentence. It spits something out. It's probably inaccurate. It's oddly formatted. It's got all kinds of stuff with it, and so you kind of read through it, and you're like, okay, that kind of sucks. So let's just not use that tool. So there's a barrier of entry, right? This is a model that I've been using a lot recently called Risen, and it's a really good framework um, for instructing something like a Chat GPT on what you want out of it, and to ensure that you're getting quality outputs. So R is your role. You're going to tell it basically what role you want it to play. I want you to play the expert of a CSM, or act like a rocket engineer, or act like whatever expertise you're wanting to get out of it. Instruction is telling the model exactly what you want it to do. Write an article, write a blog post, write an email, write a thing, create an image. Image generation is now a thing as well. Then you're going to tell what steps you want it to take, or literally what you want it to look like, a paragraph, a bullet list. You're going to be specific about that. You're going to set some expectations for what good looks like. So, set the expectation for what you want out of it. And then you're going to narrow it down. And one of the things that I love telling ChatGPT not to do is to lie, because ChatGPT, if it doesn't know, it'll make stuff up. It's a very well known thing. So you got to tell it not to make stuff up. So I just put in an oversimplified example of the Risen framework. In this case, it's underwater basket weaving, which I actually didn't know was a thing until I put it in here. And I actually had ChatGPT write me this article about underwater basket weaving. And I asked it to give me, I asked it to play an expert in underwater basket weaving, write a brief overview of it, two short paragraphs, step-by-step bullet list, and a conclusion paragraph. Gave it a goal, and I asked it to sound natural, and I asked it not to make stuff up. This is the exact prompt I put in. And again, this is an oversimplified prompt. I might want to give it more specifics. And I got a nice little 2-paragraph opening. I got a bulleted list about underwater basket weaving and a closing paragraph. So using things like Risen is a really great way to get predictable and repeatable, uh, I guess, quality outputs out of something like ChatGPT. You're not going to use Risen every single time, right? Sometimes you just need to look something up real quick, or ask it a quick question, in which case you wouldn't use Risen. Um, and and one of the things that's difficult, or that has been difficult in the early days of Gen AI, is this notion of having to write a prompt every time. And so now what you're seeing is prompt libraries. So people posting their prompts for this, and there's several people out there that have written some CSM focused prompts, which is super helpful. And quick search will turn up quite a bit of them. So you can start to do some copying and pasting of prompts that have been written, or you can save your own prompts and reuse them in the future. One of the things that ChatGPT now can do is commit things to memory. So, for instance, one of the examples I used in last week's episode um, was about training ChatGPT on my tone of voice. So I had it analyze an article of mine. It spit out an analysis of my tone when I'm writing, and I asked it to create a prompt out of it and save it to memory, so that now when I ask ChatGPT to write something in my tone of voice, it'll know generally what kind of tonality to use in its output. So there's some interesting ways that you can use it, but fundamentally, using a framework like Risen is a really great way to get quality outputs out of ChatGPT. And this is the kind of stuff that if you're a CS leader, I would spend some time with your team um, and teaching them how to do it, because it's a great skill. It's a valuable skill that you can use in other in other modalities as well. Yeah, I'll show you the example of the prompt there, the prompt. But it's a really valuable skill that really anyone can benefit from. So it's also kind of a good kind of career thing. If you, I mean, again, last week's or this week's episode of the podcast is essentially a primer for CSMs to use some of this stuff. So feel free to send it to them. Anyway, that's the Risen framework. One other kind of point that I want to make with regards to generative AI, and then we'll move on to a couple of platform examples before wrapping up here, is there are a couple of tools that do some specialized things. We are all used to ChatGPT, for example. ChatGPT is an awesome assistant. It does stuff like we just talked about. Write me this, analyze this. I have it proofread my emails sometimes. It's a great personal assistant. But I've been using the crap out of Perplexity lately. In fact, Perplexity has replaced Google for my searching needs. And essentially what it is call it an answer engine, because it is generative AI. You ask it a question and it will, create a nice detailed write-up for you and cite sources as to where it got its information and things like that. But, compared to Google, where you get kind of maybe an excerpt at the top, you get some links, you got to go to the link, figure out it's the wrong link, go to another link. It's kind of tedious that way, and we've kind of all gotten used to it. Perplexity is an amazing research tool. Where that comes into play with CSMs specifically is, let's say you get assigned to a new account, you know nothing about the account. With Perplexity, in a matter of seconds, you can get a summary of the company's history. You can get a deep analysis of their earnings reports, of their profitability. You can get a deep analysis on their C-level suite, their board, who their investors are, which is amazing information as a CSM to have on at your fingertips, because sometimes you might be educating your champions on some of this stuff. So I love using Perplexity for that kind of those kinds of things. And again, it's become my my new Google. Susie loves it too. Yep, it's good stuff. Okay, so a couple of kind of platform examples that I do want to give you. And what I mean by platform is, the cost of development for apps is really starting to plummet again because of generative AI. And so we're starting to see this rise of cool apps coming up that are really meant to help CS and post sale teams. One of them is an app called Agent Copilot. Super early on this kind of tech, but amazing implications where you can essentially train Agent Copilot on your likeness, so your video and your voice. You can feed it a script, integrate it to your CRM, and all of a sudden, using things like tokens like first name, last name, email, all those kinds of things, you can essentially create a personalized video for every single one of your contacts using one script and your CRM data, and fire off 500 videos to all your contacts all at once, each one of them personalized to each individual contact. It's a little early on this kind of tech. HeyGen is another app that does this. But the implications are pretty big because, ultimately the video is coming from you. It's just personalized with AI, which is super cool. For those of you who are managing knowledge base teams and knowledge base platforms, have a look at AriGlad, because what it will do is it will analyze your support tickets, and it will not only update knowledge base articles for you, but it will also suggest and write new knowledge base articles for you. And anyone who's managed a knowledge base before knows what a task and what a chore it is to keep it relevant and to keep it accurate. And so, again, another example of how the tooling can make our lives so much easier. Oh yeah, and there's this little tool called Matic. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like, you know, automation for PowerPoint creation for like your QBRs and stuff. No big deal. Just kidding. I had to put them in here because obviously that's why we're here. Matic's super cool. Been a fan for a long time. And again, it's part of that like digital tool belt, right? That you can use to really get some complexity kind of taken out of the equation. So a couple more things for you, and then we're going to switch to questions because I know some of you might have some questions. I'm going to, okay, I'll talk about this really quickly. I put in a little bit about measuring success. Feel free to take a screenshot of it. Um, but you know, I think the bottom right box for me is one of the most powerful ones because in CS, I really like to combine and blend traditional CS metrics with things like you know, product and campaign metrics. So for instance, you know, for my digital motions, I love looking at win rates. So, you know, has the adoption increased because of a certain playbook that we've run in digital domain? How many human hours have we saved? Like those kinds of things, which are essentially, you know, a blend of those things. I'm working on a digital CS maturity model that'll be up on the website relatively soon. So if you know, if you want to get a real check on like where you are in digital maturity, there's going to be a quiz that I put up there, hopefully in the month of July. So I'm kind of testing it out right now, but just wanted to put that out there in case you wanted to check it out. But ultimately, I want to wrap with a couple of thoughts. The first is human connection is absolutely critical in whatever it is we do. This is, you know, for my podcast, I send all of my guests a handwritten thank you card. And this isn't necessarily digital, but the point is I have an automation in the background that tells me, okay, you know, you're about to release the episode, so now's the time to write that thank you card, right? So it's that combination of I've automated things to help me remember to be human, which is kind of odd. Um, but you know, I think that this is directly relatable to customer success. Why not give your CSMs a stack of thank you cards and automate some steps in there where you know they can go write them and send them off. It's a great connection point. And for me, you know, digital is essentially digital but always present. One of the quotes from one of my guests, actually, Kaylee Killeran, if you know of her, she's at Lupio. You know, she had this whole notion about, look, you're building out this digital journey in this ideal state, but you need to make sure that at every stage, the customer has the opportunity to engage with a human along the way. And I love that. And it's kind of a mantra that I live by. And with that, I'd love to open it up to any questions or thoughts or general chit chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. That was fantastic.
Sure.
I know we're sitting here on the Zoom, but I can tell you that I'm applauding you right now. I learned a lot and really appreciate
Cool.
everything that you guys did. So we do have a couple minutes left here. If anybody has any last minute questions that we could talk about, happy to share them right now so that this way we can get those answers out. If there are none, that's okay. With that, we can end our session today. And any questions that come up later, you can share them with us here at Matic because we'll be passing along those questions over to Alex after this call, and we'll share his answers with all of you, along with the recording of this session. This session will be posted and published in our resource hub on Matic.io, and all Summit attendees, so all of you, will be notified when the recordings are live. And so we want to thank you all for joining us today. It's been a fantastic day, and of course, Alex, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to share everything with us.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for emceeing, David. Nice to see everybody. I see some familiar faces in the chat, so appreciate your kind words.
Awesome. Thank you all and enjoy the day, everybody. Talk to y'all soon.
Bye.